Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video we're going to be building a movie application using NuxtJS, which is a framework built on top of Vue.js. Now in front of us here I have the completed and deployed version of the application which we're going to be building. So at the end of this video, once we have completed this application, I will show you how to go ahead and deploy it to Heroku. Alright, now before we go ahead and get into this application, I first want to run you through it here. So at the very top here we have our hero section, which has our subtitle, our actual title here, and then this call to action. Now when I click on this call to action button, what it's going to do is going to scroll us down here. Let me go ahead and actually do a refresh here. It seemed like it didn't want to go ahead and do it here. Let's try this again, and if I click on this, it should scroll us down to the movie section here. Okay, now to go ahead and get the actual movie information that we're going to use to populate our application, we're going to be using a API called the Movie Database API, which later on within this video, I will show you how to go ahead and set up an account and request an API key so that you can follow along with this tutorial. Now, initially when we load in our application here, we're going to be requesting 20 of the latest streaming movies that are available either on a streaming platform or in theaters. Okay, so if I scroll down here, we should have 20 movies initially. Now, the information which we're going to be requesting is quite simple. We're going to be getting the actual cover photo here. We're going to be grabbing the title of the movie, the release date, and here in the top left-hand corner, we have the rating of the movie, which for this one right here, the Suicide Squad, is 8.1. Now, you may notice when I hover over here, we have this pop-up box or this box appear from the bottom, which is actually going to contain a brief overview of the movie itself. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to be getting the latest 20 movies, but if we also want to search for a specific movie, we can also do that. So let's say I want to look up the series of let's see here, Potter. If I can hit enter here, it's going to return us all the Harry Potter movies. Okay, so you can also do this as well in addition to getting the latest streaming movies. Now, say we no longer want to search for Harry Potter. I have this button here which appears after we make a search query. We can go in and clear this, and it's going to return us back to the initial 20 of the latest streaming movies here. Now we can also get a little bit more information on our movie here by clicking this button below the release date here of Get More Info. Okay, so we click on that and it's going to take us to this page right here, which once again has a cover photo. We have the title, we have the tagline, the release date, the duration of the movie, the revenue that it made, and once again, the overview here. Okay, and once we no longer want to look at this, we have a button here at the very top left-hand corner. We can click on back, and it's going to take us back to the latest movies that we're initially going to be pulling here. So that's what we're going to be building, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, really quick before we jump into the video here, if you want to support the channel and the free content that I am making here on YouTube, you now have the ability to join my channel. So you're going to see this button here called join on the actual channel homepage. Now, when you click on this, it's going to populate a modal here, which is going to allow you to join my channel for $2.99 a month. Now, not only are you supporting me and the free content that I'm making here on YouTube, but you're also going to get loyalty badges next to your name whenever you leave a comment on one of my videos. Now, in addition to this, you're also going to get credited inside of my video outro and video descriptions. Now, for anybody new to Nuxt, I want to do a quick overview of the framework and provide you a few reasons why you may use Nuxt over traditional Vue. Now, if you already have experience and are familiar with Nuxt, feel free to go ahead and skip this chapter of the video. Now, NuxtJS is a framework built on top of Vue, which offers server-side rendering SSR or static site generation SSG. Now, you may wonder, and this is the biggest question, why would you use NuxtJS over Vue? Now, the first reason is universal apps, which I mentioned here in the summary, which is SSR or SSG, so server-side rendering, static site generation. Now, if you're unaware, by default, traditional Vue is client-side rendered. Now, you could go ahead and set up your traditional Vue app to be server-side rendered or statically generated, but that requires some setting up, and out of the box with Nuxt, you're going to have that ability. Now, the next thing here is simple page routing. Now, within Nuxt, to go ahead and create a route, it's very easy. So when you actually create your Nuxt application, it's going to come with a folder called pages, and inside of here, you can go ahead and create your your file. So say for example, we want to have a about path. Now within Nuxt, all we have to do is actually create the file of about.view, and it's going to automatically create that page route, where inside of view, what we have to do is we have to create that file, so about.view. Then we need to head over to the router folder and go into our index.js. We have to import that file, then we have to go ahead and create the route ourselves. So you can see that they make page routing very, very simple compared to the traditional Vue framework itself. Now the next thing here is easy control of metadata and SEO optimization, title and metadata. So out of the box, NuxtJS comes with a plugin called Vue Meta, which is going to allow us to edit and assign metadata to our pages very easy. And since we're going to be able to server-side render our site, it's going to improve the SEO optimization on Google. So this is a big reason why a lot of people, I feel, use NuxtJS, is because of the SEO optimization, which is a big thing when, you know, Google is crawling your site or application. Now, the last thing here is data fetching. Now, Nuxt has a custom fetch hook, which offers a lot of good options when fetching data, and we'll go ahead and get into those here within this video, and also page transitions. It makes it very simple to go ahead and set up those transitions. Okay, so to easily create our Nuxt application here, we're going to be using npx and the command of create Nuxt app here, followed by the project name. Now, in order to use npx, you need to make sure that you have Node.js installed on your system here. So if you don't know if you have Node installed, all you need to do is open up your terminal or command prompt and then type in the command of node-v here. And if you get returned a version, that means you have Node on your system, and you'll be able to follow along with the tutorial without any problems. Now, if you don't get a version return here, then come over to this website right here of nodejs.org and download and install the latest version of Node. Now, assuming that you have Node.js installed on your system, we can begin to generate our Nuxt application. Now, for this video, I'm going to be using VS Code, and currently within VS Code, I have open an empty folder here of Nuxt Movie App. So let's go ahead and start off by opening up our terminal here, and then I'm going to head back over to the documentation, and I'm going to copy this command right here of create Nuxt app. Now, what this is going to do, if you're familiar with Vue or probably React, it's going to ask you some questions regarding the application or the Nuxt app that we're going to be creating. Okay, so I had this copied, so let's head back over to our terminal and let's paste this in. Now, we want to go ahead and actually give this a project name here, so I'm going to remove this default right here of project name, and we'll call this movie app. I think you actually can't do any dashes, so we'll just say movie app like that. Okay, so this should go ahead and prompt us some options here. So by default, the project name, we'll just go ahead and leave that as movie app. We'll hit enter here. Now for the programming language, we're going to go ahead and stick with JavaScript. And for the package manager, we're going to go ahead and select NPM. And then here is the option where you can actually select a UI framework. They have a whole bunch here. Tailwind, I believe Bootstrap is in here as well. But for this project, to keep it simple, I'm going to go ahead and select none. Okay, now for the NuxtJS modules, we have a few options here. I'm going to go ahead and select just Axios here for our fetching of data. We'll be using that to go ahead and reach out to our movie database API. So I'll go ahead and hit enter here to continue on. Now for the linting tools, we have a few options. We have ESLint and Prettier that I'm going to go ahead and select here by going over and hitting space. And then you have a few other options such as lint stage files, styleLint, and commitlint, but I'm not going to go ahead and select those. And then for testing framework, we're not going to get into that within this video, so I'm going to go ahead and select none. And then for rendering mode here. So as I mentioned, the main benefit of using Nuxt is the ability out of the box to have server-side rendering or static site generation set up for you, but you also have the option to use a single page app as you do in traditional Vue. But for this video, we're going to go ahead and select universal here. Now for deployment target, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to say server for Node.js hosting. Okay. Now for development tools, you have a few options here. So we're not going to be using any of these. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit enter past this. And then for continuous integration, we're going to go ahead and select none. And then for version control system, we'll go ahead and do git. And then from here, it's going to go ahead and install all the packages required to go ahead and set up our Nuxt application. All right, so some time has passed, and as you can see, we have successfully created our project of movie app. Now, to get started, what we want to do here is we first want to cd into our movie app folder here. All right, and then to spin up our local development server to see our actual project and all the changes we're going to make, we want to run the command of npm run dev here. And this is going to load up our application on our local host here. So you can see this is all going to run, and once this has finished building, we should see a URL down here to go ahead and listen or watch our application. So you can see right now it's on localhost port 64695. So if I go ahead and command and click this, it should open it up in our browser, and we're going to have this default template, very similar to how the Vue CLI works when you create a traditional Vue application. All right, so currently we have this template right here, which we don't want. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup to give us a fresh slate to build our movie application in. Okay, let's begin here by expanding our movie app folder here to display all the folders and files that were generated when we went and created our Nuxt application here. Now, prior to doing any cleanup here, let's go ahead and run through the file structure here, as it is a little bit different than the traditional Vue file structure that you get when using the Vue CLI. Now, to begin, let's start here with the package.json. Now, the one thing I do want to cover here within this is just the Nuxt version, which at the time we're recording this video, I am using Nuxt 2.15.7. Okay, and then most of the other stuff within here is very similar to your traditional Vue. We have all of our scripts, which are a little bit different compared to the normal Vue scripts you get when using the Vue CLI, and then we have our dev dependencies here, which you went ahead and selected when we were creating our Nuxt application here. And then we have our Nuxt config here, which we'll go ahead and get into a little bit here. We have some of the default page headers. We have some global CSS options here, our plugins, modules, and some other things along the way. All right, but nothing really too important here, and anything that we do need to go ahead and cover, I will go ahead and explain a little bit later on. Now, moving up here, the rest of these files aren't really too important. Now, in this video, we're not going to be using the store or Vuex, but when you create your Nuxt application, if we go ahead and select the store folder and go to the README, the directory already contains the Vuex store files. All you need to go ahead and do is just create the file in this directory and you'll be all set. But we're not going to go ahead and do that within this video, but I did want to go ahead and point that out. And then we have our static folder right here, which right now just has our favicon or fav icon. Now, the next folder here is pretty important. This is the pages. So this is where we're going to create all of our routes. So currently we have one route within our application right now, and it's our home view, or the the default view. This is slash. Okay, now if we wanted to, for example, create a additional page, it's actually really easy, like I mentioned earlier on in the overview of Nuxt itself. So let's say we wanted to create a about route. So we'll have our file called about.view. Now the name is important here because it's going to correlate with the actual name of the route, which is very similar to your traditional HTML, or if you come from a PHP background, that as well. So if I go ahead and say about.view here, it's going to generate this view. So if we go ahead and do a view template here and we say h1 and we say about page like this, and if we go back over to our application here and we go to /about here, we should now see we have our h1 here of about page. So as you can see, it's really easy to create routes within Nuxt itself here. Okay, so we're not going to be using this this file, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete it for now. And that's pretty much the pages folder. So really important, and we'll be using this a few times within our application here. And then we have our node modules here, which we're not going to go ahead and get into. We have our components right here, which are the default components that are generated when we create a Nuxt application. And then we have our Nuxt folder here. Now, the one thing I do want to point out here, which a lot of these files don't really need to be talked about, but the one thing I do want to mention here is this layouts folder here. So very similar within Vue, how you have your app.view, we have a default.view within this Nuxt folder here. Now we can't do anything within this itself. If we want to extend and add anything to our layout here, we need to go ahead and create a actual layouts folder here within our movie app folder itself. And we'll go ahead and get into that a little bit later on. But that is the general file structure here for our Nuxt application. So moving along here, let's go ahead and do some cleanup on the files that were generated for us that we're not going to be utilizing within our app here. So first off, we have our components folder right here, which has the nuxtlogo.view file and also the tutorial.view file. So we're not going to be using these within our application, so we can go ahead and remove these. So we'll go ahead and delete this right here, and we'll go ahead and also delete our tutorial component here. Okay. Now inside of our pages folder here, if we go to index.view, we were using this component right here of tutorial, which we're not going to be using anymore. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and remove this, and I'm going to put an empty div in here, and I'm going to go ahead and give it the class of home here. And that's going to go ahead and do it for our cleanup. So now if we head back over to our application here, we should have a fresh, clean slate to begin working on our movies application. So one thing I like to have in most projects that I'm working on is SASS. It's just a personal preference. I prefer it over traditional CSS, and your opinion may differ. But unfortunately, out of the box, NuxtJS does not come with the ability to add that to our project when we're creating it. If we want to add it, we have to do it manually. But as you can see right here, all we need to do to add it to our project is run this line right here. Now, in addition to this, what I also want to do, which is why we're going to be installing SASS, is I want to create a global style sheet that's going to have our global styles. And, we're going to be using SCSS or SASS in there, so it makes sense to go ahead and install this prior to going ahead and doing that. So here on this specific page for the documentation, it shows us how we can install SASS and how we can also assign a global style sheet to our Nuxt project. So let's go ahead and begin to implement that. So first off, let's go ahead and install SASS. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this line right here, and we're going to head over to our application, and we're going to open up our terminal here, and we're going to go ahead and cd into our movie app here, and we're going to copy in and paste this line of code, and we're going to go ahead and install those 2 or 3 dependencies. Okay, so some time has passed here. If we go ahead and close out our terminal here, we head over to our package.json, we should see now that we have fibers installed here, we have SASS, and then we have SASS loader. So now we can utilize SASS within our Nuxt application here. Now, the next thing I want to go ahead and do is I want to incorporate a global style sheet within our Nuxt application. So as you can see right here, what we need to do is we need to create a new folder, and then we need to create our style sheet within that folder, and then we need to come into our Nuxt config right here, and we need to go ahead and import that file into our CSS array right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So inside of our movie app folder here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and we'll call this assets. See, like that. And then inside of here, we're going to have a new file, and we'll call this default.scss like that. Now, to save some time here, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste in these global styles. As this video isn't really about styling, I want to go ahead and save some time and focus more on the core concepts of Nuxt. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste these in here, and I'll go over them really quick. So let me go ahead and go back to the top, and then we'll minimize some things here to make it easier to read. Okay. Now, starting up at the top here, we have our Google font. We're going to be using the font family of Carla. And then we have below that the reset here. So we have margin 0, padding 0, box sizing border box, font family Carla, backup sans serif, and we have scroll behavior set to smooth. Now here we have some app transitions, which we're going to be talking about this a little bit later on. So I don't want to go ahead and get into this too much. So I'll go ahead and leave that out. And then below this, we have our app right here, which is going to have a background color of this kind of a charcoal gray, and we're going to give it a min height of 100 VH. Then we have our button styling here, which is some traditional styling, display block, background color, padding, all that good stuff. So some pretty simple CSS here, or yes, CSS. And then we have our button light for the button light class. And then our container here, max with 1440, push everything to the center with the margin 0. And then we have our loading class right here, which is going to be for our loading spinner. Okay, so I did cover loading animations in a previous video, so if you guys are confused on how this works, I'll go ahead and leave a link down below in the description to the video I did on animations and exactly how this works. So we have our keyframes right here, We have it going to transform 360 degrees, which is a full circle. And then we have the animation right here where we're calling this keyframe, and we're having that run infinitely. So it keeps going in a circle entirely. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, in order to use these styles, what we need to do is we need to go over to our Nuxt config right here. And we need to go down to the CSS portion, which is actually right in front of us here. And we need to go ahead and do some quotes here. And we need to say @ and we'll say / assets here. And then we need to go ahead and target our defaults.scss here. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to take by default. We may need to go ahead and do a restart on our development server. Let's go ahead and check, because what we can do is go back to our browser here and go to the movie app. And if we do a refresh, we shouldn't see anything. So we are getting an error here. So let me see exactly what this is. Okay, so I did a reset on the development server here, and that seemed to go ahead and clear the error we were getting. So whenever you make changes to your nuxtconfig.js, you need to perform a server reset in order for those changes to take effect. So if I go ahead and close out our terminal here, we head back over to our application, and I go to inspect here, and I look at the body here, you'll see now that that default reset we had here within our defaults.scss is now being applied to our Nuxt application here. Now, one thing I do want to mention, for any of the styling that I do copy and paste in within this video, you can head over to the link down below in the description, which will be a link to the GitHub repository, and you should be able to find all of the styling which you can copy and paste into your app if you are following along with me. So within Vue, you're probably familiar with a file called app.vue. It's a file which you'd import components that you want to be applied to every single page within your application. All right, now within Nuxt, they don't have a file called app.vue. However, the concept is still very similar to how it works inside of traditional Vue. Now here on the Nuxt documentation, we have the docs for the actual layouts here. Now layouts are very similar to how app.vue works in traditional Vue. Okay, now if you recall earlier on in this video, we went ahead and did some digging around in the file structure here. So if we go back to our application here, if we go into our .nuxt right here and into the layouts, we have this default.vue, which looks a little different than the traditional app.vue within Vue itself, but it works very similar. So we have our template right here, and this nuxt tag acts as like the router view inside of traditional Vue. Okay, now like I mentioned before, if we want to do any extending on this, say we want to go ahead and add a div around this and maybe add a header or something like that, we can't do it inside of this actual file right here. We have to go ahead and extend it. Okay, so if we go back to the documentation here, you can see that it says you can extend the main layout by adding a layouts folder, and inside of there providing or creating a file called default.vue. Now, this will be used in all pages that don't have a specified layout. Now, the really cool part of Nuxt is that you can actually have custom layouts, and we're not going to go ahead and get into it within this video, but it's actually a really cool feature. If you want to go ahead and have different layouts for different pages, they make it very easy for you to do. All you'd have to do is go inside of your script tag here, and inside of the export default here, you'd have this layout value right here, and you need to specify the layout that you want to go ahead and have for that particular page. But we're not going to go ahead and cover that within this video itself, but that is a very cool feature that they did go ahead and implement into this framework here. Okay, so let's go ahead and extend our default layout here within our Nuxt application. So let's go ahead and minimize these folders, and inside of our movie app folder itself, let's go ahead and make a folder called layouts here. Okay, now inside of here, we're going to go ahead and create a new file called default.vue. All right, and all we're going to do is I'm going to copy this template tag right here, and we're going to go ahead and paste it in here. Now, what I want to do for now, we're not going to do anything yet in here besides add a div. So we're going to go ahead and say div, and we'll give this the class of app here, and let's go ahead and move this tag into this app class here. Now, if you recall, inside of our assets here, we have this default.css, and if we scroll back up here, we have this class of app. So what we did here is we gave this a background color of this, charcoal gray and a min height of 100 VH. So since inside of this right here, this has a class of app, we should now be able to go over to our application, and we should now see that the entire screen should be 100 VH, and it should have that charcoal gray color. So let's go ahead and head over back to our project here, and you can see, once again, we added that, so we're going to need to do a reset on our server. So let me go ahead and do that really quick. Okay, so just went ahead and restarted our server here, so let's go ahead and close our terminal up, and if we head over to our actual dev environment here, now you will see that we have this dark charcoal gray background. If I go ahead and inspect it, you should see that the classes here on the app have applied the styles inside of our default.css. So now if we were to example, go back over to our div with the class of app here inside of our default layout, and we wanted to add a header to every page, which we probably wouldn't, by saying this is testing the layout here, and we go ahead and save that. We head back over to our view here, and you can see now we have the text of this is testing the layout, but we don't want to keep that within our application, so let's go ahead and remove that here. Okay, so here inside of our completed application, I want to talk about the file routing for our movie app here. So we're going to have two different routes, one which you're seeing right now, which is going to be our home route. And then when we click on a specific movie, we're going to get taken to a different route to go ahead and get more information on that specific movie. So if I go ahead and click on get more info here, you can see that the route is going to be /movies, and then we have the movie ID here. So this right here is going to change depending on whatever movie we go ahead and select. So if I go ahead and click back here, and we select a different movie such as Free Guy, you can see that this ID is different from the previous movie that we just went ahead and selected. So let's go ahead and begin to implement the same file routing structure into our Nuxt application here. Okay, so let's navigate over to our pages folder here and extend this. Now this is where we're going to be creating our file routing or our file structure, whatever you want to go ahead and call it. So right now we have a file in here called index.view, which is going to serve as our home route. Now the second route that we need to create is going to be /movies and then / the actual movie ID. So we don't know the movie ID of all the movies that we're possibly going to get, so this is going to require a route param. Now inside of traditional view, how you would go ahead and do this is you would go ahead and import your component inside of your router file, then you'd go ahead and create your route and then specify your path, and on the end of that path you would say, let's say /movies, and then you'd say / and then you specify the param, such as in our case movie ID. Now, inside of Nuxt, it's actually a little bit more simpler than that route within traditional view. Now, all we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a new folder. So the route we want is, let's see here, movies. So we're going to specify our folder of movies here. And then I want to create a new file. And what we need to do is an underscore here to specify a param. And then we need to define that param. So we're going to call this movie ID and then .view. So this may not make a lot of sense to you, but I do want to show you that this is exactly how you create a actual param on a route. So if you want to actually see this visually, we can go into our Nuxt folder here, and we can go down to our router.js right here, and you can see inside of our routes right here, we have our array, and then we have our route right here of movies / movie ID for our parameter. Okay, so then you can see right below that we have our other one for our home, which is our index. Okay, so that is going to be our simple file structure here for our movie application. All right, so let's begin by creating our first component here, which is going to be for our hero section. So inside of our components folder right here, let's go ahead and create a new file, and we're going to call this hero.view. Now for this section, we are going to be using a background image, which currently right now I have inside of a assets folder, or the assets folder we created our default SCSS file, and I have another folder that I created, and it has the movie hero.jpg image. Now if you want to follow along with me, I have this on the GitHub repository. So if we scroll over here, you can navigate to the start of the repo here, go to assets, images, movie hero.jpg, and you can download this image and then just drag and drop it into your assets folder. Okay, so moving back over to our component here, let's go ahead and start by creating our view boilerplate here. So I'm going to type in view, we're going to do tab, that's going to generate our template. our script tag here and our style tag. So first thing I want to go ahead and do here is replace the style tag with the lang of SASS and also make this scoped. And then let's go ahead and head to our template tag here to begin with our markup. Now, what I want to do here is create a div with the class of hero. Now inside of here, we're going to have our background image. So let's go ahead and navigate to that. So we're going to go out one folder here because currently we are in our components folder. We want to go to the assets here. So we're going to say ... and we'll say assets. And then we'll say, actually we got to go to images, and then we'll do movie hero, not hero, hero.jpg, like that. Okay, now below this, we're going to have our text content. So we're going to do what we call a text container. So we're going to have a div with a class of text container. Now inside of this, we're going to have another div with a class of text. Okay, and then we're going to have our span here, which is going to have the class of mini heading. Okay, and we're going to have this say now streaming. And then below this, we're going to have our H1. Now inside of here, we're going to have a span here because we want to do some additional styling to a certain portion of our heading here. So inside of the span, I'm going to say now, because we're going to make this a little bit of a thicker font type. And then we're going to say streaming, like that. And then lastly, what we're going to have here is our call to action button. So we're going to do a anchor tag. And for the href, we're going to have a div within our index.view that's going to have an ID of, let's see here, movie. Why did I do that still? So we'll say movie dash grid. Okay, so we'll go ahead and make this later, but what it's going to do is when we click on this, it's going to take us to that ID that correlates with this right here. Okay, and then what I want to do is I want to apply a class of button here, which if you recall, we have inside of our default.scss right here. We have button, and then we have button light. So that's where I'm getting these styles from. Okay, now inside of here for the actual content, we're going to say view movies here. Okay, and that's going to go ahead and do it for our markup. So let's go ahead down to our export default here, and let's just give this component a name, and we'll say hero here. Now to save some time, because I don't want to focus too much on the styling for this this application and this little crash course, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste in the styling. So what I'm going to do is head back over to the GitHub repository here. We're going to navigate to the main folder here, or the main files. We're going to go to components, we're going to go to hero, and we're going to scroll down here, and you can see we have this style. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all this styling in here, and I'll go over it briefly and show you exactly what we're doing. So let's go ahead and grab all this, and then we'll head back over to our application here, and let's go ahead and paste this in. So very easy what we're doing here. We're giving the hero a fixed height, and then we're adjusting it on a media query here. So default, it's 400. When we get to min width of 750, we're going to change it to 500. Now what we have here on the after selector is we're doing a background overlay, and we can go ahead and make this without any additional HTML by using after and then having this content right here and setting it to an empty string, and then positioning it absolute and giving it a height and width of 100%, and then we're giving it a background color here of black with a 60% opacity. Okay, and then we have our image styling right here, which is just width and height, and then the object fit cover, which will go ahead and make it fit and look a lot better without getting all scrunched up. Okay, and then for our text container here, we're positioning this absolute, bringing it to the top, width and height 100%, display flex, and then we're gonna go ahead and push everything to the center here. And then we have our actual text class here, which we have the width of 100%, max width of 1400, which is actually the same width as our container here. If I go down, so that way it's going to be equal with our container of all of our content. That's why we kind of have this container and then this text right here. And then we're going to center that, or push it to the center with margin 0 auto. And then we have some simple styling here for our mini heading, just a font weight, font size, color, and then a little bit of a media query here to change the size on bigger and smaller screens. Same thing for H1 here, just some base styles, color, font size, font weight, nothing too complex, and I didn't want to go ahead and have to write all this out and waste time within this video. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and do it for our hero component here. Now what we want to do is we want to use this hero component inside of our index.view. So what we can do is come back over to our index.view component here. Now, I do want to reference the documentation to show you exactly how importing a component works inside of Nuxt compared to traditional Vue. It's actually really cool. So if we go back over to the documentation here, I pulled up the components documentation here. So as you can see, starting from version 2.13, I believe we're on 2.15 right now, Nuxt is going to auto import your components when used in your templates. So you can see here, to activate this feature, we need to set components to true inside of our Nuxt config. So if we go back over to our project here and we go down to our Nuxt config, by default, when we created our Nuxt application, this was already set to true. So to import our component here, it's as easy as literally coming inside of here and then saying our open bracket hero and our slash and our closing brackets. So now if we head over to our application here and we go over to the movie app and we do a refresh here, you should see now we have our hero component loaded into our home view. Okay, so at this point within the video, we're ready to begin working with our movie database API. Now, in order to work with this, we need to request an API key. Now, to request an API key, you need to create an account here on the moviedb.org. It's really easy, takes less than 2 minutes, and then all you have to do is confirm your account and then log in. Now, once you're logged in, what you need to do is go up to where you have this icon right here, click on it, and then expand it and click on settings here. Now, once you do this, you're going to have this navigation menu here on the left, and where we want to go ahead and click on is this API right here. And then they have an option right here to request an API key. So to generate a new API key, we're going to go ahead and click here. And then we're going to select that we are a developer, and we're going to come all the way down here and accept the terms of use. So we'll go ahead and click accept here. And then what you need to do is you need to fill out this little application here by saying the application name, which you can just say, you know, a movie application. And then for the application URL, all you could do is put in like a local host here or whatever the URL you're going to be using. It doesn't really necessarily matter. You just got to fill in a application URL here and then give a brief summary and then your actual information here. Okay, so once you do that, you should go ahead and retrieve an API key within 2 to 3 minutes after submitting this form. And then once you do that, you will be ready to go ahead and work with the movie database API and continue on with this tutorial. Now, assuming that you have your API key, let's continue on here. So first off, what I want to do is make an API call to the movie database API to retrieve our data that we're going to be using to populate our home page here. Now, I should mention that we are going to be using the options API for this tutorial. Now, when Nuxt releases the full support of the composition API, I will do another video covering that. But for now, we're going to be using the options API. Okay, so let's go ahead and first off create some data here. So we'll go ahead and open this up and we'll return this. Now, what I want to do is create an array here, and we'll just go ahead and set this to an empty array. So we're going to have our movies array, which is where we're going to store all of our movie data that we get returned from our API. Now, next up, what I want to go ahead and do is actually create our methods here. So let's go ahead and create this. Okay, and we are going to be using Axios, which we did install when we created our Nuxt application here. So all I need to do is say import, let's see here, Axios from, and then we'll say Axios like that, because we're going to be using that within our function here. So let's go ahead and create our function here. So this is going to be called get movies. Okay, and we are going to be using async and await here. So what we need to do is define async here before the function. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and open up our function here. So let's go ahead and start by creating a const here of data. And we're going to set this equal to Axios, and we want to go ahead and get. Now, the URL that we want to go ahead and retrieve, so let's go ahead over to our browser here. So here is the documentation for the movie database API. So the endpoint that we want to hit is going to be /movie/now-playing. So here are some options that we have to go ahead and attach to our API call, such as the API key, the language, page, and region. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to pass in the language of EN for English, and we're also only going to be getting the first page, which will have 20 results. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste in my API call from the finished project here. And you can also find this if we go to the repository here. We can go to the pages here, into index, and if we scroll down here, you should be able to find that within the function right here. So here you go. Now obviously this isn't the best way to go ahead and make an API call, especially when using an API key, but for this crash course and this application, it's not going to be going to production, so it's okay. But normally you'd want to go ahead and hide your API key and make this call on the back end, but I usually always mention that when I do any videos that have an API key exposed on the front end here. Okay, so here is the URL we want to go ahead and call. So let's go back over to our project here and let's go ahead and paste this in here. Okay, and we actually don't need to do that. We'll just do quotes here. So you can see here we have our API. So we're doing /movie/now playing. We have our API key, which is mine, which I will be changing. So don't try to use this one, use your own. And then we have our language, and then we have US page 1. Okay, now what we want to do is we're going to have another variable here called result. And then we want to set this equal to await and say data here. Okay. Now, next up, what we want to do is let's just go ahead and log this out to the console here. So we're going to say console.log, and we're going to say result here. So if we head over to our application here, let's go ahead and scroll back. And if we go to movie app here and we go to look at our console, we aren't going to see anything. Okay, so if I go ahead and refresh this, you can see that we don't have anything, and ignore these errors, they're not really relevant. Okay, it's just telling us from the ESLint we shouldn't have any console log statements. Now, you can see we don't have our info logged out to the console. That is because we never went ahead and initiated or called our function to go ahead and get the movies. Now, in traditional Vue, what we would do is we would call this function inside of the created lifecycle hook. Now, within Nux, it works a little bit differently. We make that call within a custom hook within Nux, which is called fetch. So here on the documentation for the fetch hook, I did want to reference a few things that I think are really helpful features that come along with using the fetch hook here. So first off, this is a hook called during the server-side rendering after the component instance is created and on the client when navigating. Okay, so pretty generic stuff there. Now, the first helpful thing is that it exposes this fetch state here at the component level with the following properties. So the first one is pending, which we actually will use within this video, which is going to return a Boolean value, which will allow us to display something while we are fetching the data if it's taking a little longer than normal. So say maybe you're fetching something and someone has a poor internet connection, instead of displaying nothing, we'll display a little loading spinner to let the user know that we're trying to get the data. Now, a few other properties here that we're not going to use is error and timestamp. But along with timestamp, there is something useful, which isn't really related to timestamp, but I see it right here, is called keep alive, which you actually can store the fetches. If you've already fetched that data before, it won't go ahead and fetch them again, if that makes sense. And there's some things you can do to go ahead and customize that. We're not going to go ahead and get into that, but I will touch upon this keep alive property that we can go ahead and put on our Nuxt instance. All right. Now, there is a lot to data fetching in here, and you can see if I scroll down, this is what the hook looks like. So we have a sync fetch, and then we can go ahead and call our code within this right here. Okay, and there is a lot to it. We have some options down here, which you really won't touch upon too much. We have fetch on server, fetch delay, and some other things like that. There is, like I said, a lot to this, but we'll just be scratching the surface. But the documentation here on Nux is really good. And if you want to go ahead and look into this a little bit more, I highly recommend doing so, as there is a lot of cool features that come along with data fetching here within Nux. So let's go ahead and implement the fetch hook into our application. So right under our data, let's do a line break here and create our fetch hook. So we're going to say async here, and we'll say fetch, and then we'll open this up right here. Okay, so now all we want to go ahead and do is call our function right here of get movies. So we're going to say await this dot get movies, like that, and that should go ahead and retrieve our data. And since we're logging it out to the console, this result, we should now see that result within our console. So let's go ahead and head back over to our application here, And let's go ahead and take a peek, and you can see here that we are now getting something. But if I do refresh it, you'll see that it's going to look really odd because it's within this Nux SSR. So it doesn't really make it easy to read, obviously, and that's the one thing I don't like about this when logging things out to the console. But as you can see, we are able to now get our information. And if I go ahead and maybe say results.data, you'll probably be able to see the data within this. So if I go and refresh it again, you can see here that now it's actually, okay, we don't want that. It's going to retrieve all of the data. So you can see here pages 1, and we have all our results here, which is in an array, and we have all the movie information that we're getting here. Okay, so what we want to do now is we don't want to obviously log this out to the console. We want to store all of the information for each movie inside of this movies array here. So what we're going to want to do is, if you recall, we can kind of see this, not really that good. We have this results array right here. So you want to go ahead and iterate through this results array and push each one of these movie objects to our local movies array. Okay, so to do this, what we're going to do is we'll remove this console.log here, and we'll say result.data.results, and we're going to say for each here, and then for each we'll go ahead and have a param movie here. We'll go ahead and run our callback, and then all we want to do is reference this dot movies, and then we're going to push that movie here, movie into so what we're going to do here is we're going to push each movie into our movies array. All right, so now after this, if we do console.log this dot movies, we should see now we have all of our movies inside of our movies array. So let's go ahead and look over here, and if I do a refresh, it's probably still going to be in that really ugly format here, but we have all of our movies now inside of our movies array, which we're going to be using to populate our home view here. Okay, so let's begin to populate our home view here. So first off, what I want to do to keep things organized is add a comment right here, and we'll just say hero. Now below this, I'll add another comment, and this is going to be for movies here. Now the structure is going to look like this. We're going to have a div with a class of container here and also movies. Okay. Now what we want to do here is we're going to have a div, and we're going to pass it the ID here of movie grid. Now, if you recall from our hero component right here, we gave our anchor tag this ID of movie grid. So what's going to happen when a user clicks on that anchor tag, it's going to take them down to this section right here within this movie grid div. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, what we want to do is we're also going to give this the class of movie grid. And inside of here, we're going to have a div with a class of movie. Now, what we want to do is we want to create this div right here for each movie that we have inside of our movies array here. So to do that, we're going to use what they call a v-for loop on this div right here. Okay, so we're going to say v-for. And we're going to go ahead and wrap this and say movie, and then do index here, and then we're going to say in our movies array here. Now with view, when you use a v-for loop, you have to assign each one a unique key. So we're going to go ahead and bind key here to our index. Now we could go ahead and use the movie ID for this, but I always tend to go ahead and default to using just the index here, just my personal preference. But all you have to do for this key is have a unique value for each one, and this is, usually the way I go ahead and do that. All right, so for the markup here, first off, what we want to do is we're going to have a div with the class of, let's see here, movie image here, and we're going to have our image. Now, this API returns the image not in a full URL format. So what I mean by that is if we head over to the browser here, I have pulled up the configuration. So you can see right here, to build an image URL, you need 3 pieces of data. You need the base URL, the size, and the file path. So we're going to go ahead and manually go ahead and insert this, and then we'll dynamically go ahead and insert the file path here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this right here, head back over, and we're going to do a bind here on our src value. And what we're going to do inside of here is we're going to do some interpolation. So we're going to use some backticks, and we're going to paste this in right here. Now, what we want to do is there is a value inside of this object or our movie that we want to go ahead and assign. It's going to be like the file path. So it's called a poster path. Okay, so we'll do our interpolation here. So we'll do our money sign and our brackets, and we're going to say movie because that is the value we gave it here in our v-for loop. So we're going to say movie, and we're going to say .poster underscore path here. Okay. Now, if you're wondering where we're getting these values from, because it's not so easy to see within our actual application when we were console.logging it out to the console, what we can do is we can go down to the movies here, and we were on the Get Now Playing, and you can see all of the results here. So we have poster path, we have adult, and it kind of tells you what the response should be. Okay, so this is where I'm getting all of these values from. So if you're confused, just go ahead and reference this documentation. I'm going to take it kind of quick here because it doesn't really, I guess, matter in a sense of, you know, what exactly each one of these things do. That's just what we're going to be populating our application with. All right, so if you want to add anything to it, feel free to go ahead and add some stuff to it. You have all this information that we were getting returned right here. Okay, so the next thing we want to do after our image is going to be our movie review here. So what we're going to do is inside of this movie image, we're going to go ahead and do a paragraph tag here with a class of review. Now, the reason why we're doing this inside of the movie image div here is because we want to position these absolute to this image right here. So if we go back over to our application once more, our finished application, you'll see that the review is this right here, and then we'll have one more thing called the overview, and these are going to be positioned inside of the image here. Okay, so that's why we're writing these inside of this movie image div. Okay, so we'll go ahead and, actually not right there, what we'll do here is we're going to go ahead and do some brackets here to go ahead and populate the data here, and we're going to say movie.vote underscore average, and then I'll copy and paste this down here, and then we'll say overview here. Okay, and then we'll change this right here to movie overview like that. Okay, and that's going to be it for our movie image div here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up to save some space. Now, the next thing we're going to have here is another div called info. Now, inside of here, we're going to have a paragraph tag. It's going to have the class of title. And let's go ahead and see. So what we're going to do here is the titles could be quite lengthy, and we could have some issues with the actual titles running off the page or causing them to go to the next line, causing some weird things from a UI perspective. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do, first off, we'll go ahead and open this up right here. So we're going to say movie.title, but we're also going to slice this. So we only want it to be 25 characters or length long. Okay, so we can say slice like this, and we're going to start with 0 for the first character and go 25. Now, the issue with doing just this is if we wanted to say 0.25 and ... what happens if the title is less than 25 characters? Then we're going to have an issue where we have the full title and then ... That just wouldn't make sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a span tag here. Let's go ahead and do this. So I'll say span here. And we only want to show the ... if movie.title.length, L-E-N-G-T-H here, is greater than 25 right here, then we will append this span right here. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for the title. All right. Now, the next thing we want to do here is going to be the release date, which I'm going to copy and paste in because it does take a little bit more time to write all this out, and I'll go ahead and explain what we're doing here. So let me go ahead and copy and paste this in here from the other's finished project. So what we're doing here is we have a paragraph tag of release here, and then we have the text here of release, but we need to convert the release date to a local actual date. Currently, it's not in that format when we get a return from the API. So to do that, what we're doing is we're taking the value here and we're putting it into a new date. And then we're running the method of toLocalString with the value here of enus. And then we have some properties on here. So we want the month long, the day numeric, and the year numeric. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to do is we're going to add our button to go to the actual, the more information on the movie here. Okay, so right below release here. Now within View 3, we would use something called a router link. Now within Nuxt, they have their own custom tag we use, which is called Nuxt link, like this. Okay, and this has an opening and a closing tag. All right, and it works very similar to the router. So first off, I want to classify this, or I want to style it up as a button. So we're going to go ahead and add the class of button and then button light here. Okay, now it also accepts the toParam here. Okay, now what we're going to be doing is, if we take a look, we gave this right here the name of movie id.view. So if we go into the router here inside of our Nuxt and we go down here, you'll see that this has the name of movies.movieid. Now for me, I always like to use the name when I'm going to a route instead of using the path. It's just my personal preference. You could go ahead and define the route, but I always choose to use the actual path name. Okay, so inside of here, what we're going to say is we're going to have the name, and then we want to go to movies-movieid, and we also want to send along the parameter, because as you recall, each one of these this route is going to have that unique ID of the movie. So we'll go ahead and define params here. Okay, and we gave the param, if you recall, the param value of movie ID. So we'll go ahead and say here, movie ID is going to equal movie dot CMOVIE dot ID here. Okay, and then what we want to pass inside of here is simply get more info, like that. Okay, so currently right now we have no styling, which we'll add here in a minute, but if we head over to our application, we should see now that we're going to have a few of these, all 20 of these populated here within our application. So now when I click on get more info, we should be taken to the movies route and then that movie ID. So let's go ahead and check this out here. So if I do that, you can see we're taken to the route of /movies and then that movie ID. So one small mistake that I do want to correct here is within our image, when I added the data into our URL here, I actually removed some of the URL, causing our image not to load. So what I've done here is I've copied and pasted in the portion that I removed, and if we save this and head back over to our application, we should now see the image for each one of our movies here. All right, now to address the styling for our movies grid here, like I mentioned before, the main focus of this video is not to go ahead and do styling, it's to go ahead and show you guys NuxtJS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back over to the GitHub repository and I'm going to copy and paste in the styling here for our movies and our movies grid classes. Okay, so I have this already pre-selected here. So if you are looking for this, it is in the pages folder under index.view. Okay, so if we head back over to our project here, what we're going to do is we're going to open up our style tags because we don't have them here within this project just yet, and we're going to copy and paste in this styling here. So now if we head back over to our application, we should see hopefully everything is styled up correctly, and it isn't. So we must have done something wrong here. So movies grid, did I name that movie grid instead of movies? That's probably what I did. Yep. So we're going to actually change this class to movies grid to keep things consistent here. Okay, so with that saved, we should be able to head over now and see that everything is styled up correctly, and there we go. So everything appears to be working correctly if you scroll down here. Yeah, okay. So I'll go over the CSS like I normally do when I paste it in here. It's nothing too complicated, but let's start here, or start off at the top. So we have our movies class here, which we just have a padding around everything, 32 pixels top and bottom, 16 pixels left and right. And then for our movies grid here, you can assume by the name of the class we were going to be using the grid here, which we are. We have a column gap of 32 pixels and a row gap of 64 pixels. Now by default on mobile, we're going to have a 1 column grid here. And then when we get up to 500, we're going to go to 2 columns, 750. This should actually probably be 3. So I'll change that to 3 columns here. And then when we get up to 1100 pixels, we're going to go to 4. Now for the movie class itself, this is nothing really too complex, so we're just positioning a relative display flex here, flex direction column. Now the one thing I do want to highlight is actually this right here. So when we hover over, you can see we have this nice little overview box populate from the bottom. Now how we're doing this is if I come down here to the styling for the overview, you can see I want to highlight this right here. We have the translate Y at 100%, which will take this off the page by 100%, meaning nothing will be showing. And then I have this transition right here of 3 seconds, ease in, out, all. And then what we're doing here is when we hover over the movie image itself, we're going to target the overview and we're going to target the transform and translate Y, and we're going to put that to 0 so it goes back to its original position, giving it that appearance and that, that function you're seeing when we hover over it. Okay, and then for image here, nothing crazy, just display block with 100% height 100%. And then for the review, which is going to be that thing in the top left hand corner right here, how we're doing that is positioning an absolute, top and left 0, display flex, giving it a width and height, and aligning everything to the center here. So pretty simple and basic stuff here, not doing anything overly complicated. And then we have the border radius to give it that kind of squared look, and then this kind of roundness here on the bottom right. So we're doing that with this border radius right here, and that's pretty much it. And then for the info, just margin top auto, and then some basic margin top color and font sizes here for the title, the release, and our button. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and do it here for our movies grid. Now to wrap up our home page here, we want to implement the ability to search for a movie. Now, before we go ahead and do that, I do want to address 1 or 2 quick issues here inside of our hero. So we have a formatting error here where we don't have any spaces between now and streaming I spelt that wrong. So let's go ahead and update that here really quickly. So inside of our hero component here, let's go ahead and change this to streaming. And then we'll go ahead and copy and paste this there, spell that right. And then to get the space between now and streaming, let's just go ahead and add a space after the span here, and that should go ahead and fix our issue here. Now for our search bar, where we're going to put this is right above the first row of movies here. So let's go ahead and work on the markup and styling for our search bar here. Okay, so inside of our index.view here, in between our hero and our movies, I'm going to create a comment here for search. And then we're going to create a new div with a class of container and also search here. Okay, then we're going to have our input with a type of text. And then we're going to have a placeholder here of search. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to hook up a data value to this input to capture the user's search term. Okay, so to do that, we need to come down to data inside of our return, and then under our movies here, we're going to go ahead and create a new data value called search input and set this equal to an empty string. And then what we can do here to capture this is we can do a V model here on the input, and we want to go ahead and say .lazy, and I'll explain why we're doing this a little bit. It doesn't really make a difference now, but what it's going to do is instead of updating on each keystroke, it's going to update when the user enters and leaves the actual input itself. Okay, so then we'll hook this up to search input. Now what we want to do is we're going to create a button right below this to go ahead and clear our search input. Okay, so we'll go ahead and say clear search like that, and then we'll go apply a few classes or a class to this of button. And then we only want to show this button if there is actually content or characters within the input itself. So let's go ahead and do a v show here, and we only want to show this if the search input here does not equal an empty string. Okay, and then that is going to do it for our markup here. So we haven't added any styling yet, but if we head back over to our application, we should now be left with this right here. So for the styling, as we've done with everything in this application, we're going to head over to the GitHub repository, and we're going to copy this very minimal styling for our search input here. Okay, and we'll head back over here, and right above our movies class, we'll go ahead and add our search here. So all we're doing is displaying the class of search as flex, giving it some padding 32 and 16, 32 on top and bottom, 16 left and right. And for the input, we're saying max with 350 pixels, but take up 100% of the space if it is perhaps lower, which it probably won't be. Then we're giving it some padding of 12 pixels on the top and bottom, 6 on the left and right, font size 14, border none, and on focus, you want to get rid of that nasty outline. Now, on the button itself, because we have the button and the search input side by side, by default, we have a border radius on the button, so you do want to go ahead and remove the top left and bottom left from that button so it looks like one long square. Okay, so with that implemented, if we head back over to our movie app here, you can see that we now have this much better styled search input. So now when I type a term, you'll see that we should actually not, oh, there it goes. So once we're done, so for example, now if I go out of here and I leave the input, it's going to disappear. But now if I type in action here and I hit tab, for example, then our button is going to show. So it's actually not updating on each keystroke. It's updating once the user leaves the actual input here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, since we have this all implemented, what we want to do is when the user hits enter on the search input, we want to query the movie database API for any movies that match our keyword here. Okay, and then when we click on this clear search button, we want to remove the actual search value here from our search input. So let's go ahead and work on implementing that ability here into our movie application. Now, the function to search for a movie is going to be very identical to the function we have here for getting our movies when we initially load in to the page here. Now, to begin, what I want to do is I want to create a new piece of data up here that's going to be called searched movies, which is going to be equal to an empty array, very similar to our movies array right here. Then what I want to do is come right below our get movies function right here, and we're going to go ahead and create a new function. So we'll say async here because we're going to be using async and await, and we'll call this searched movies, and we'll go ahead and open this up here. So first off, what we want to do is we're going to create a variable here to store our Axios call. So we're going to say const data equals Axios.get, and then the API call or the route we're going to call is a little bit different from what we have right here. So if we head back over to the movie database API, I have pulled up the documentation to search for a movie. So you can see right here, this is the endpoint here for searching. So it's /search/movie, and then you have these query strings right here. So you have your API key, you have your language, you have your page, and then something new here is actually going to be a query, which is going to be a string, which is going to be the text that the user typed in the search input. Now, to go ahead and get this full API URL call, let's head over to the GitHub repository here, and we can go into this function right here of search movies and just grab the entire URL here. Okay, so let's head back over to our application here. Now, since we are going to be using interpolation, we do need to use backticks because we are going to be inserting this search input data into this call right here. So let's go ahead and paste that in, and there we go. So we have /search/movie, our API key, the language, ENUS as the language, and we have page 1, and then we have our query here, which is going to be our search input that the user is typing in. Okay. Now, after this, what we want to do is we're going to say const result equals await data here. And then the return value is going to be identical to what we have here in our get movies. So if we can just copy and paste this to save some time, it's going to be the result here. Then we have data, and then we have results. So we have that same results array that we want to iterate through. And then what we want to do, instead of pushing the actual movie to this dot movies, we want to push it to this dot searched movies here. Okay, so let's go ahead and paste that. Now our function is complete here. So how are we going to call this? Well, what we want to do is on our input here, we're going to say @ and I believe we want key Let me look here really quick. We want at key up here. And then we want to specifically look for the enter key here. And then instead of calling the actual function here, what we're going to do to take advantage of the features that Nux has within this fetch hook right here, we're going to recall the fetch hook. So how you recall the fetch hook inside of your template here is by saying $fetch. Okay. Now, the current problem we have with this method is that it's going to rerun this function right here, which we don't want to have happen. So we need to do a little bit of editing to our fetch hook here. So let's go ahead and do that here. Now, what we want to have happen is we want to run a if check here. So we want to say if this dot search input equals an empty string, then what we want to do is we want to run this function right here. Okay, now the reason why we're doing this is because on the initial loading of the page, this hook is going to run. And by default, we have this set to an empty string. So that means when this is an empty string, the page has first loaded in. So we want to go ahead and get all the movies. Okay, and then we're going to return out of this here. Okay, now we also want to have one other check here, and we want to check if the fetch hook is ran and this dot search input doesn't equal an empty string and it actually does have value, it does have characters in it, then we want to run our new function here of this dot searched movies. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And the reason why we're using the fetch in here is because we can take advantage of the, I believe it was called, let me see here, the fetch state pending, and we can go ahead and initiate our loading icon much easier and have access to the fetch state properties if you want to go ahead and customize this application any further. Okay, so that's how we're going to handle it. There may be better ways to do it, but this is the way I chose to do it so that we can take advantage of the fetch hook here. Now we can do some cleanup here within our fetch hook. So initially I explicitly defined this if check here to show you what was going to happen if the search input was an empty string or if it was not an empty string. So we actually don't need this if right here, because if this is true, then it's going to return out of the fetch hook. Therefore, we are only really cluttering up our code with this if check right here. So we can save 2 lines of code and get the same result by just doing this. Now, one issue I just realized is we have searched movies here as a function and as a data value. So we're actually going to get an error if we do that. So what I want to do is we're going to change this to search movies, and then we need to change this down here as well. Now, what's going to happen if we actually search for a movie? Well, right now, nothing's going to happen. We're not going to see anything visually because we haven't set up our markup or our template to go ahead and account for these new movies. So first off, let's go ahead and make sure everything's working by doing a console.log of this .searched movies here. So if we head back over to our application here and we open up our console, we should right now probably have a few errors here. So let's go ahead and clear that by doing a refresh here, and we'll get some warnings here, but don't go ahead and worry about that. It's just some linter errors. So let's go ahead and search for Harry Potter, and let's go ahead and enter here. And as you can see, we're going to get the result here of 20 of our movies, which is all working great. But we want to display them here where we have our movies present. So how do we go ahead and do that? Well, what we need to do is we need to go within our project here and go into the markup. So within this container, all we're going to need to do is we're going to go ahead and make another, we're going to copy and paste our movie grid here. So what we want to do is we're going to say right here on the first div, we want to say v. We only want to show this v if, so we're going to do a v if here. We only want to show this if a certain condition is true. So we're going to say if search input does not equal an empty string. Okay. And then inside of here, what we want to do, because at this point, what we're saying here is if search input has characters, then show this grid right here. Otherwise, you want to show this. Okay. Now, instead of iterating through our movies here, we're going to go ahead and iterate through the data value down here of searched movies instead. Okay, so let's go ahead and paste that in here. I think I passed it up. Okay, and that's all we need to go ahead and do. Okay, and then we can go ahead and put a comment here and say searched movies like this to make it look a little more clear. And then we can do another one right here and say now streaming like that. Now, before we go ahead and test this, we still need to make one more function, which is going to be the function to clear our search. So let's go ahead and create that function here really quick. It's actually quite an easy function. And all we're going to say within this function is we'll go right below the search movies here, and we'll say clear search. And what we're going to say in here is this dot search input is going to equal an empty string. And then we're going to say this dot searched movies is equal to an empty array. So we want to go ahead and reset the search values here. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to copy this function right here. Let's go ahead and just put a space there. It's bothering me. And then we'll come up to our button here and we'll say click here. And then we want to run that function each time we click this button. Okay, so let's go ahead and test everything out and see if our search query function is working here. So let's go ahead and refresh it here. Do we remove that console.log because we really don't need it in there anymore? I don't believe we did. Let's go ahead and remove that like that. There we go. And then head back over to our application here. Let's close our console. So fingers crossed, if we type in Harry Potter here, we should now see we have the Harry Potter results here inside of our home view. And if I go ahead and clear the search, we should have the initial results from the now playing API call. Now, to improve the user experience within our application, I want to insert a loading component whenever we are fetching data. Now, at the moment, we're on a pretty good connection, so you're not really going to see much of a hiccup in actually receiving our data from a user experience perspective. But if a user's on a slower connection, it may take up to 1 to 3 seconds to retrieve that data. And in that time, we want to show them something saying that we're retrieving that data. So for example here, if I type in Harry Potter, you'll see we have maybe like a second, or maybe not even a second, like a half a second where we don't have any results. Now, that could be a lot longer if, like I mentioned, the internet connection is poor. All right, so let's go ahead and work on implementing our loading component here. So first off, what I want to do is head back over to our project here, and we're going to go ahead and create our components. So let's go ahead and say new file here in our components folder, and we're going to say loading.view here. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and get our view boilerplate here. And for the markup here, it's actually quite simple. We're going to have the div with a class of loading and then our span tag. Now, initially when we created our default.scss, I went ahead and put the loading styling in here so that it was we would have easy access to it. So what I'm going to do is we're going to copy and paste this loading class here, and we're going to stick it with the component. Now we could keep it with the default SCSS, but it just makes sense to have the styling here within the component itself and not outside of it. Okay, so we'll say style.scss scoped here, and we'll go ahead and paste that in here, and we'll go ahead and save this as well. Now, to use this like we have with our hero component, all we need to do is first off, just for organization, we'll just go ahead and put a comment here and say loading, and then we'll do loading like that, and we should have that component loaded into our application. Okay, now what we need to do here is we only want to show this right here, so we're going to say vif the fetch state, so we'll go ahead and do money sign fetch state dot pending is true, otherwise we'll show this right here. Okay, so now if we take a look at our application, we should briefly see our loading component shown within the actual view here. So if we do a quick refresh, you probably won't see it because there isn't much time between the retrieving of data and displaying it. So we'll go ahead and actually mimic that here in a second, but let's go ahead and try searching up Harry Potter and see if we see it. And we barely see it for a second. I don't know if you were able to catch that there, but what we can do is on the actual data fetching documentation here, there is an option we can pass here called fetch delay, which is an integer. Now what this is going to do is set the minimum executing time in milliseconds to avoid quick flashes like we're seeing, and also to, simulate a little bit of a longer loading time in our case, where I want to show you this loading animation. So let's go ahead and copy fetch delay here and go back to our application, and we can actually just paste this right inside of the actual export default here as an option. So we'll say fetch delay, and let's go ahead and set this to 1000 milliseconds here. Okay. So within our movie app here, you can see it's actually down there, and I believe I am missing a little bit of styling here. So yeah, what we want to do is copy the loading class here, go back to our application. So that was on the GitHub repository, and let's go ahead and just paste this in here. So we're altering the loading a little bit here. We want it to align at the flex start. If we go to the loading here, it's actually aligned to the center here, I believe. So we want to have it at the very top. And then what we're doing here is just giving it a little bit of a padding of on the top of 120. So let's go ahead and see how that looks now. All right, so let's go ahead and refresh here. And we should see nothing happen because we already have the data. It's working really quickly. So if we search in Harry Potter here, we should now see for 1 second we have our loading animation. So you can see how that heavily is going to improve the user experience when the data is fetching. Now earlier on, I did mention we were going to talk about this keep alive directive right here, which what it does is saves fetch calls on pages you already visited, which is a really cool feature, and you can get pretty in depth with this. So you can also pass a prop here to keep only 10 max. You can use, I think, some stuff like the timestamp to say if it's been more than 30 seconds, go ahead and refetch it anyway. So you can get pretty in depth with this, which we're not going to get that far into it. I just want to go ahead and scratch the surface of it a little bit and just kind of implement it into our application to show you how this can be very beneficial. Okay, now to go ahead and demonstrate before we implement this, what I want to do is head back over to our function here of get movies. And what I want to do is log out to the console right here. We're just going to say hi. Okay, so each time this function runs, we should see that hi is logged out inside of our console. Okay, so let's go back to our movie app here, and it's going to load in here. And let's go ahead and inspect this, and you should see that when that function ran, we see hi here, which is what we're looking for. Okay, now let me show you what happens if we go to perhaps this route right here, which we will get an error because we haven't defined anything within this template yet. But if I go back here, you can see that it's rerunning the function to get the data from the API, which in my opinion is not really needed because not much probably would have changed within 10 or 15 seconds. But I guess you can make the case where if a user sat on that page for 2 hours, you may want to go ahead and refresh it, which in that case may come into play where you'd want to go ahead and use the timestamp property here on the fetch state, then to go ahead and rerun fetch. But like I said, we're not going to get into it too in depth here. We're just going to go ahead and scratch the surface of it. Now I want to show you what happens if we go ahead and add this this directive keep alive on our nuxt tag here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is copy this right here, and we're going to go back to our application, and we want to go to our layouts here, and on our default.view, let's go ahead and add the keep alive directive here. Okay, so now you've seen that each time we went from the route of our specific movie back to home, it was running that function. But now with this added on here, since we already made that call on that page, it's now going to rerun our function to make that API call, which in a sense will go ahead and save you perhaps money in the long run. But for application, I just wanted to show you in this crash course, show you how this directive worked. Okay, so now if we head back over to our movie app here and I refresh it, so on refresh you should still see hi because it's going to reach out to the API and run that function. But now if I click on a movie here and go back, you're going to see that we're not running that function. So that is how the actual caching will work. So that way you're not going to continually run functions or API calls for data that you already have. Now, the final route that we need to populate is going to be our individual movie details. So here inside of our movie ID file, let's begin with our view template or boilerplate. So let's go ahead and generate that. And inside of our template, we're going to go ahead and create a div with the classes of container and also single movie. Okay. Now, since we're going to be relying on data to populate this component, let's go ahead and actually retrieve that data before we do any of our markup. Now, before we do that, let's also change this to style.scss scoped here. Okay, now to go ahead and retrieve the data, first off, let's import Axios here. So we'll say import Axios from Axios. And inside of our export default, we'll go ahead and give this a name and we'll say single movie. And then what we also want to do is we need to create some data here. So we'll go ahead and create data, go ahead and put a comma there. We'll return here. And then all we want to do is create a data to hold our actual movie in our individual movie. So we'll create a data value here of movie and we'll set this equal to null initially. Okay. Then what we want to do is we're going to create our method here to go ahead and retrieve our individual movie from the API. So we'll go ahead and define our methods here. And we're going to create a function with a sync and we'll call this get single movie. And then what we want to do is we're going to create our data variable here. So we'll say const data equals axios.get. Now, for this API call, it's going to be once again a little different from, well, I should say the URL is going to be a little bit different from the other two that we have done. So if we head over to our browser here, you can see I have the endpoint for this one, which is going to require the movie ID. Okay, so what I'm going to do to save some time is I'm going to copy and paste the API URL from the finished repo or finished project. You can also get it here inside of the GitHub repository. So let's head back to our application here and we're going to go ahead and paste this in. Now, since we're going to be using some interpolation here, we need to go ahead and do some backticks. So I made a mistake there, so let's go ahead and do that. Now, for the movie ID, this is actually going to be found inside of the actual URL. So how we can get that is by defining this .route.params.id, which actually that's what I named it in the initial project. Inside of this project, I believe the param ID was movie ID, but let me go ahead and double check here really quick. Yeah, so it's movie ID, so we do need to update that, and I'll go ahead and update that inside of the repo as well. So that'll go ahead and populate the API call with the movie ID and give us the correct movie information back. Okay, then all we need to do is say const result equals await data here, and then what we want to do is we're going to say this dot movie is going to equal result dot data here. Okay, now we don't have a way of calling this function, so what we need to do is we're going to be using the fetch hook once again. So let's go ahead and define our fetch hook here below data. So we'll say async and we'll say fetch like this, put our comma. Then all we want to do is await this dot get single movie like that. Now, once again, to show you the purpose of, we're going to be using a loading animation here until we get the information back. So we don't have that flicker. We're going to add a fetch, let's see here, fetch delay of 1000. Okay. Now, what I also want to do in here is we're going to be actually calling our loading component within here. So let's go ahead and define that as well. So we'll say loading up here, and then what we want to do is you want to only have the show, so we'll say v if, and then we're going to say fetch state dot pending is true, otherwise we'll say v else right here, and that should go ahead and resolve that error. So if I were to, let's say, just go inside of our div here and we say h1 and we go ahead and do, let's say this, we're going to redo this, but I just want to show you that everything's working. We'll say this dot movie dot title, and I think we can actually just do movie dot title. Well, I'll keep it like that. I think we do need to reference this. I'm not 100% sure. So now if we head back over to our application here and we close our console here and we refresh it, now when we head over to, let's say, an individual movie here, we should have, let's see, cannot read property pending of undefined. Let me take a look. Maybe I spelled something wrong here. So it appears that I spelled the fetch hook wrong, so let's go ahead and spell that right, which is why we don't have access to fetch state, because we aren't actually defining that hook in here. So let's say fetch and do that. And now let's go ahead and try this out again. So let's head back to our initial page here and let's try a new movie. We'll do Suicide Squad. So we're going to see the loading animation for a brief second, and there we go. You're now seeing we are getting the Suicide Squad. So that is all working correctly. So let's go ahead and properly populate this route with the correct data. So to begin, let's remove this H1 we had for testing purposes, as we aren't going to need it any longer. Now, the first thing I want to have inside of here is a button to go back to our home page here. So let's go ahead and create a Nuxt link like this. And why does it do that? And then we'll have our closing Nuxt link like that. And inside of here, we'll go ahead and pass it a class to style us up as a button, and then also a to attribute here, which is going to go navigate to the component with the name of index here. Okay, and then for the button text, we'll just have it say back like that. Now, next up, we're going to have another div here, which is going to have all of the movie info. So we'll say div with a class of movie info. And inside of here, the first thing we're going to have is our movie image. So we'll have another div with a class of movie img here. Now, this is going to be the same markup as the one we had within our home view here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this image tag right here to save some time, and we'll paste it here inside of this movie image. So the same path, and we're going to reference the movie.poster_path. All right. Now, underneath this div of movie image, we're going to have another div that's going to have all of the movie information or the movie content. So we're going to say movie, and we'll do content here. Now, the first thing we're going to have is the title. So we're going to do an H1 here, and we'll say title, and then we'll pass in the data here of movie.title. All right. Then underneath this, we're going to have several paragraph tags here to display some movie fact information. Okay, so we're going to have a paragraph tag here, and we're going to give it the class of movie fact. And this one's also going to have the class of tagline here. So inside of here, we're going to have a span, and it's going to have the content or the label of tagline. And we'll say colon here. And then outside of here, what we want to do is we're going to have some quotes. And then we'll say, we only need one there. And then we'll have it say movie. And then we have the value of tagline here. Okay. Then the next one we have is going to be another paragraph tag here with a class of movie fact. And this one's going to be for the release date, which once again, we've already kind of had this format set up inside of our home view. So what I'm going to do is we're going to come down here to this content inside of the release tag here. I'm going to copy, and we're going to paste this in the actual movie fact here. So I'm actually going to put inside of a span, we'll do released like this, and then I'll copy and paste in the additional stuff right below that, and we don't need to have that released right there. Okay, so that should all work good. Now, the next thing we have here is going to be the duration of the movie. So what we want to do is we're going to say p.movie fact here. And then inside of here, we're going to have another span. You can see the common format here. So we'll say duration. And then outside of the span, we'll go ahead and have our data here. So it's going to be movie and the value of runtime here. And then we'll say minutes. And that doesn't need to be capitalized. Okay, there we go. And then we have two more. The next one we have here is going to be the revenue. Okay, so once again, for this one, to save some time, it's going to be one of those things we have to convert to a local string because the data that they give us is not properly formatted here. So I'm going to head over to the finished repository, and I'm going to grab this right here. So let's go ahead and paste that in here, and I'll show you what we're doing here. So we have another paragraph tag with the class of movie fact, and then we have our span of revenue, and then we're taking the movie revenue data they give us and converting it to a local string, ENUS, and we're actually making this into currency. So you can see style is currency, and then the currency value is in US dollars here. Okay, now the last one we have here is going to be for the overview. So we'll give this a class of movie fact once more, and then we'll have our span here per usual, and we'll say overview like that, and then we'll go ahead and insert our data here, which is going to be movie.overview. Okay, and that should go ahead and do it for the markup here. Now let's head over to the GitHub repository to grab the styling for the individual movie details here, and then that should wrap it up for our routes. So let's swipe over to the GitHub repo here, and we are inside of the pages folder. We want to go inside of the movies folder here, and we are going to select this file of id.view. And I know in our project it's movieid.view, but I did have some name changes in between the completed version here and the version I'm walking you through. So I will update the repository to reflect the correct naming here, but nonetheless, let's scroll down here inside of this file and grab the styling for our single movie. It's actually really generic styling. I will go over it really quick, and we'll go ahead and paste this inside of our file here. Okay, so for the entire single movie container, we want the color to be white. We're giving it a min height of 100 VH, and we are displaying it as flex, and we are justifying everything to the center, and we have some padding around it of 32 on the top and bottom, 16 on the left and right. Now for our button, so that it doesn't take up the full width of the single movie container, we are aligning it to the flex start to go ahead and make it only take up the amount of space that it needs based on the text. Okay. Now next up we have our movie info here. So this is responsive, so you can see here by default we're displaying it as flex, and we're having it in a column, and then we're aligning everything to the center, and we have a gap of 32, color white. And then once we get to a min width of 800 pixels, we're having it go to flex direction of row and aligning all the items to the start. And then we have our image styling here, which is pretty generic. We're just limiting the height on the cover photo here and some different media query settings. So you can see at 800 pixels, max height 700 originally, and anything below that 500. Now for the movie content here, just some font size and font weight on the H1. And for all the movie facts here, margin top 12, font size of 20, line height 1.5 to give it a little bit more separation. And then we have the span here with the font weight and text decoration to make the label stand out a little bit more. And then for the tagline here, just some simple font styling. Okay, so that should go ahead and do it. Now if we save it, we should have a fairly completed movie application here. So let's go ahead and test everything out. So within our application here, let's scroll down and we'll do a refresh really quick, and let's click on a movie to make sure everything is working properly. So let's click on the first one here of Suicide Squad, and if we do that, we're going to get our loading animation, and there we go. We have our individual movie details here all styled out correctly. So we have our back button, we have the cover photo, we have the title, the tagline, release, duration, revenue, and overview. Now, feel free to add any amount of information you want to this. If we head over to the actual API, you can see that there is quite a bit of information that you get returned that you could go ahead and populate here inside of this route right here. And to show you that this is responsive, we can go ahead and shrink this down here, and it will go ahead and stack. There we go. And yeah, so that is going to be our individual movie details. So if I go ahead and put this back and we click on the back button here, we should be returned to our home page here. Now throughout this video, you may have noticed when we change pages or go from one page to another, the transition between those two pages has been very smooth. Now, if you haven't caught on to it, let me show you here. So if I click on the Get More Info here, and we go to this new page, you can see how the transition from the previous page to this new page here was very smooth. And if we go ahead and click back here, it does the same thing. Now, the reason why this is happening is because we have set up some global transitions for our Nuxt application here. So this may look a little familiar right here to you. We actually copied and pasted this styling in our default style sheet when we went ahead and created that earlier on within the video. So I'm not going to touch upon this too much, but I did want to go ahead and mention this is how we are actually transitioning and making our pages transition very smoothly. Now, if you go through the documentation here, you can actually do transitions for each one of your pages. You just got to go ahead and set that up within each one of your files here, and it shows you how to do that within the documentation here. I'm not going to cover this, but I just wanted to go ahead and mention it. So if we head over to our application, you'll see that if we go over to the default.scss, we have the same styling right here to go ahead and apply the smooth transitions that you're seeing that are occurring when we go from page to page. Now our application is completed, but before we begin the process of setting it up to be deployed to Heroku, we're missing one important thing, and that is SEO optimization with our title and our metadata. Now to go ahead and set this, it's actually very easy. So if we head over to the documentation, they actually have a head method we can use directly inside each one of our pages to go ahead and set the title and all sorts of metadata. And it looks like this right here in this example or this code snippet. So we have our head method, and then we return the title, and then we have a meta array, and we have these objects here for each one of our meta objects that we want. So we can have a description, and then we can have the description of that page. We could also have keywords, and you can do all the stuff to properly SEO optimize your application. So let's go ahead and begin to set this up in our project. So let's begin with our home page here. So inside of our export default, we need to define our head method here. Okay, and then inside of here, we want to go ahead and return. And the first thing we want to define is going to be our page title. So we'll say title here. And the title for our home page is going to say movie app dash latest streaming movie info here. Okay, so now if we head back over to our application and we do a refresh, we should now see that the title inside of our tab says movie app latest streaming movie info. So that looks a lot better than just having the generic movie app name we gave our project. Okay, now let's go ahead and set up some meta information for this particular page. So to do that, we want to define our meta here with our array. And then inside of here, we're going to have an object. Now, the first property we need to set here is a HID, which is going to be a unique identifier. So for this particular meta information or this metadata we're going to be creating here, we're going to do a description. So we'll say description. Did I spell that right? I think I did. Okay. Then the next field here we're going to have is the name of it. So we're going to have the same thing here, and we're going to say description. Okay. And then the final thing we need here, we need to define is the content. Okay. Now for this, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it to save some time here. And then there we go. There is our first bit of metadata. Now I also want to create one more to show you we can do more than one. So what I'll do is I'll just copy and duplicate this down one more time. Now instead of description, what we're going to do here is we'll say keywords. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and also paste in the keywords that we're using for this particular page. Now, obviously this is not SEO optimized. I'm just doing this as an example. So we have movies, stream, and streaming. Okay, not to SEO optimize here, but it does a trick to show you exactly how this works. So if we save this and we head over to our application and we do a refresh once or twice here, and if we go to inspect, we should now see that metadata we just created inside of our head here. So you can see we have the description here. So it says get all the latest streaming movies in theaters and online. So that is good. And then we also have the keywords right here. So we have the data HID, we have the name, and we also have the content that we went ahead and defined, such as movies, stream, and streaming. So we have the title and metadata set for our home page here, but when we go to select this button down here to get some additional information on a particular movie, you can see that the title reverts back to movie app here. So what I would like to do is I would like to have the title here inside of the tab be set to the name of the movie here. So let's go ahead and begin to work on implementing that. So here inside of our project, what we need to do is come into our file here of movieid.view, and we'll go right below the name here and we'll create our head method. Okay, and what we want to do here is actually use a comma, not a period. Then we'll return here, Then all we need to do is we're going to say title is going to be this.movie.title. Now, to avoid any errors, I did realize that this can't be set to null, otherwise this won't work properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this equal to an empty string. So if you have this set to null, this will not work properly and you will get an error when coming into your route. So make sure you update the movie data value here to an empty string. All right, so now if we head back over to our application here and we go back and we do a refresh here, and if we select, let's do the Jungle Cruise here, you should see that the title is now going to be Jungle Cruise. And if we go select a different video here, it should go ahead and correlate to the title of that particular movie. So let's go ahead and do Space Jam here, and you can see that now the title inside of our browser tab here is the title of the actual movie we have selected. Okay, so our application is completed. Now the final thing that we need to do is deploy it to Heroku. So let's head over to Heroku and get started. So first off, what you need to do is have an account with Heroku. If you don't, pause the video right now and go and create one. It's free, quick, and very easy to do. Okay, now assuming that you have your account, what you want to do is you're going to go to the dashboard here and we're going to click on this button of new right here, and we're going to go ahead and click on the option of create new app. So we need to go ahead and give our app a name. Now feel free to name this anything you want, but for my circumstance, I'm going to go ahead and say YT movie app, like that, and then we're going to choose a region. So for me, it's going to be the United States. Okay, so once we have all this information filled out, we're going to go ahead and select create an app here, and it's then going to take us to our project dashboard here. So when it comes to deployment, we have a few different methods we can use here. So first off, we have the Heroku CLI, and then we have the ability to connect directly up to our GitHub repository, which is the way that I'm going to take in this video. Okay, so this will require you to have your work you've been doing pushed up to a GitHub repo. Now, what I use to go ahead and push up my code to GitHub is actually an application for Mac called Fork, but there is a ton of other applications you can use to go ahead and push code up to GitHub, but I just wanted to go ahead and mention this is what I use. Okay, so let's head back to Heroku here, and let's go ahead and select on the option of GitHub here. Okay, so I already have my account hooked up to GitHub, so if you don't have it hooked up, you may need to log in and allow GitHub to, or Heroku to access your GitHub account. Okay, so what we want to do is go ahead and search up a repository name. So if we head over to GitHub, you can see the repository that we want to look for right now is called Movie App NuxtJS. So let's go ahead and just search up movie and we'll say app here, and we'll go ahead and hit search here. And then you can see we have this repository right here, and then all we need to do is connect this. Okay, so you can see now we have connected our GitHub repository to Heroku here. So how this works here is all we need to do is choose a branch to deploy to Heroku and then click on this deploy branch button right here. And since we only have one branch within our repository, this makes things very easy. So what we want to do is to deploy this main branch. Now, before we do that, I want to go ahead and go to the documentation for deploying on Heroku. So the one thing we need to do here is we need to go to the app settings inside of the Heroku dashboard, and we need to go ahead and do some configuring to these vars here and set the host to 0.0.0, otherwise this won't work. Okay, so what I'm going to do is copy all these zeros right here, and then we want to come over to the settings here, and we want to reveal config right here, and for the key we're going to say host, and then for the value we're going to say 0.0.0.0, and we're going to go ahead and add that. Now with this set, all we need to do is go back to deploy here, and we're going to go ahead and deploy our branch here. And as you can see, what's going to happen right below here is going to start the build process for our application to be deployed to Heroku. So once this is done deploying, we should be able to go ahead and go up to the top here and select on Open App, and fingers crossed, see our application deployed on Heroku. Alright, so some time has passed and I switched to the Overview tab here within our project, and as you can see we have this column right here, or this little widget that tells us the latest activity within our project. So as you can see, the build has succeeded and our application was deployed. So now if we click on this button here of Open App, we should see our deployed application here on Heroku. Okay, so that's going to go and wrap up our video here for our movie app with NuxtJS. If you guys did enjoy, I would highly appreciate you guys leaving a like down below. And if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more content, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.